In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity.
And welcome back to another week on the Catholic Toolbox, the art of practical Catholicism. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa, here as we equip you with practical tools to live your Catholic faith in our modern world of today. And today, more than ever, we need to equip our consciences and to be able to discern using the teaching of the Church and informing ourselves of the teaching of the Church on how to make decisions using our conscience. I welcome back my good friend, dynamic Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. Welcome back to the Catholic Toolbox.
It's great to be back with you, George. It's always good to see you, my friend.
It's great. And I know you just came back from Germany and the Holy Land. Hope you had a great time.
I did. You know, it was after being away for so long, not being able to travel internationally, it was great to be back overseas again, especially in the Holy Land. You know, to be in the place where you hear Sunday after Sunday in the Gospels and to walk in the footsteps of Christ was really amazing. We started the trip in the north, Nazareth and Capernaum, you know, following Jesus's mission, and then went down to Bethlehem for his early life, and then ended with Calvary, you know, and the resurrection, and then went over to Oberammergau, Germany, for the Passion Play, which was amazing. It's hard to believe that those are just villagers from the small town of Oberammergau that put on that play, but it was absolutely amazing.
I mean, it's absolutely amazing to hear. I mean, I need to go to the Holy Land myself, and definitely when I'd be going, I'd be looking at going with a tour that's led by you, Deacon.
All right. Well, we will be going again next year. Me and actually Sonia Corbett. The two of us are going to be going in April of next year.
Okay, I'll let my wife know. Let's see. We can get out there and meet with you, and and get out to the Holy Land. I think that's the next place for us. So let's go into the topic: informing our consciences, and what does that actually entail? Informing our consciences correctly, you know, without, you know, the funny ideas that are out there about informing your conscience and using your conscience. What does that actually entail properly? Hello, Deacon.
Oh, okay, I can hear you now. For some reason, I couldn't hear you for a second there.
Okay. But what does that actually entail to inform your consciences?
Yeah. So when we hear the phrase conscience, right, we always often hear, "I'm free to follow my conscience." But what does that actually mean, right? We're free to follow a properly formed conscience, right? That's the key, because all of us have free will, right? And so we're free to make decisions about things, but those decisions should be based on a proper formation of the conscience. So when we think of conscience, what are we talking about? So we have the natural moral law that comes from God, right? And so that's the part of God's eternal law that's in every single human being, no matter what race, what color, what religion, nationality, doesn't matter. Everyone has that seed planted in their heart by God called the natural moral law. So, and that natural moral law has a fundamental principle which says, do good and avoid evil, right? So that's why even when there's an earthquake in a country like Haiti or Honduras or something like that, an atheist will go down and help the people there. They're not doing it because they believe they're following God. They're doing it because they believe it's the right thing to do, right?
Yep.
So that do good, avoid evil, that's part of the moral, the conscience, that's part of the natural moral law that's in every single person. But it has to be properly formed, right? Because if it's not properly formed, then people think that things that are to be avoided, things that are evil, are actually good, right? Yeah. And that's where we are in our culture today, right? We're in a culture that says that marriage is something else other than a man and a woman. The objective truth of what marriage is something else besides a man and a woman, and any children they have together, which is the heart, the core, the center, the foundation of civilization, culture, and society. They're saying that boys can be girls and girls can be boys, which is untrue. You know, we have people, sadly, that are confused about their sexuality and about their gender. So instead of helping to form them to the truth, we're living in a culture that says, you know, whatever I believe to be true is true. And that is not a proper way to form your conscience, which is ultimately directed toward the ultimate good, which is truth, good, and beauty itself, which is a deep, intimate relationship with God.
And I mean, many people think that the conscience is you informing yourself without the teaching of the church. I mean, it's quite a funny idea. I mean, really, I mean, that's an obstacle that we can face. Or, you know, sometimes I've heard it said, you know, by so-called Catholics, that you can inform your conscience by discerning yourself without the teaching of the church. You know, it's quite erroneous. But what are some ways that we can start to discern and inform our conscience, Deacon?
All right, that's a good point. So what people often think that, you know, I don't want the church to tell me what to do. You know, that's typically how you heard this. I don't want the church to tell me what to do with my body, with the way I think, with the way I act. Keep the church out of my bedroom, my body, my choice, right? These are things that we often hear in the culture today. But it's actually the rules and the commandments and the moral codes of the church are actually designed to form your conscience to be free, so you can express yourself fully, right? As Matthew Kelly often says, to be the best version of yourself, right? That's what proper conscience formation helps you to do. And the easiest way, George, is to give an example. Let's just say, George, that I want to be an Olympic athlete. Let's just say swimming, all right? Just pick a sport, swimming. So I want to be one of the greatest swimmers in the world. So I have two choices because I'm free. I could do it myself, right? And say, I don't need anybody to tell me how to do this. I'm free to do it however I want to do it. And so you decide, okay, I'm just going to go in the pool whenever I feel like it. I'm going to eat whatever I want. You know, I'm going to only exercise whenever I want. I'm just going to do this however I want to do it. And then so no coach would ever say, well, you want to be great, you want to be the greatest athlete in the world, just eat what you want, just show up whenever you want. No one would ever do that, because you can't be great without sacrifice, right? Yeah. So think about it. What would you do then? The other choice you have in freedom is to hire a coach. And the coach tells you, you want to be great? Here's what you must do. You have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and do exercises and spend 45 minutes in the pool. Then you go to work or to school, and then you come back and you do another couple of hours in the pool. And then you have to do calisthenics, exercise. You have to watch your diet, and you have to do all these things. You have to sacrifice time with your friends. You have to sacrifice television. You have to sacrifice time on the internet. Things that in and of themselves are not bad things, but you sacrifice those good things for something greater. And so you align yourself with those transcendent principles of learning the proper swimming techniques and sacrificing good things in order to be great. And that's what the church is trying to do in the formation of conscience, to help us to become the person who God created us to be, because we're not created for mediocrity. We're created for greatness, right? So when we align ourselves, we form our consciences according to the truth of the church. The church then helps us to fully become ourselves.
And let's talk about having a not fully formed conscience, but having the right intention. Let's say in a particular matter, or you had to make a judgment on who to vote for, but at that point in time, you never had a fully informed conscience. Do we have a moral obligation to inform our consciences as much as possible? And are we guilty in particular situations of not, how do I word this, not having an informed conscience, or doing as much as we can with as much as we know?
Yeah. So let me explain it this way, George. So if you have a true conscience, that means you want to form your conscience according to what is objectively true, right? Things that are true in and of themselves, not a truth that you create for yourself. That the pursuit of that leads to a good conscience. So if you have a true conscience and act sincerely on that true conscience, then you're said to have a true and good conscience. And any actions that flow from that would be good actions, right? Would be seen as good actions. And therefore, that's the ideal that everybody wants to strive for, right? That fundamental principle, yep. Do good and avoid evil. Yep. Now, if you have a true conscience, but can also lead to a bad conscience, if you act insincerely. So you know that something is good, is good, but you act against that. That's where sin comes in, right? So that's, for example, mortal sin. It's grave matter done with full knowledge and deliberate consent of the will. I know that I should not be looking at pornography, because looking at pornography leads me to other physical actions that I do with my body, right? But I know that that's objectively wrong, but yet I freely choose to do it anyway. So that's a true conscience that's actually acting in a bad conscience. You're acting contrary to what you know to be true, good, and beautiful. But there's also the piece that you brought up, George, is something called vincible and invincible ignorance. Yeah. So, for example, if you're invincibly ignorant, that leads to a false conscience, right? So, for example, if you grew up saying that all people of color are not as smart as white people, right? Just like, so you grew up in a racist home, and you heard that over and over and over again. Now, your conscience is being formed falsely, which is not your fault, right? Yeah. So therefore, you are invincibly ignorant, right? So in other words, your conscience is being formed in a way that's not your fault, but you think it's a good conscience, but it's actually a bad conscience, right? So that leads to non-culpable acts of evil. So if you commit acts of evil based on an invincibly ignorant conscience, then you're not as culpable for those actions, because for example, so like I said, someone who's a racist and thought that black people or people of color are less than white people, and they act on that. They say ugly things. They utter racial slurs. They defame and mock people. And because they think that they're acting in good conscience. Yeah. But so what they have to do is to understand that racism is an evil, that racism is a sin, and why, and understand how their conscience was formed incorrectly. And finally, George, there's vincible ignorance. All right. Yeah, so that's right. You know that something is true, but you bury it. For example, I know that contraception is wrong. But you know what? I'm going to rationalize it away by saying, well, we have enough kids already, and we're open to life whenever we feel like it. It's not like we're going to have an abortion. So contraception is the lesser of two evils. It's better than abortion. I mean, so we see how we rationalize our way into forming a bad conscience. That's visible ignorance. We know that something is wrong, and we form our conscience. We form a false conscience away from that because we want to satisfy some interior desire or some interior sense or feeling that we have, and not aligning ourselves with what's ultimately true. So there's this vincible and invincible ignorance that either mitigates or adds to forming a false conscience.
I mean, it's perfectly explained, Deacon. And you mentioned racism. I know you have a book coming out about racism. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So what I did, George, was it's called Building a Civilization of Love, a Catholic Response to Racism. And so what I've done, George, is that we're in a culture today that says that, if you say this and this and this, you're a racist. Like everything you say is racist. And that's just not true. So what I do in the book, in the beginning of the book, is define what racism is and make distinctions between, racism and prejudice, right? And then I make a distinction between institutional racism and people in institutions who are racist. Right? And then I talk about the history of racism. I look at it in the scriptures, because when Paul says slavery, for example, he's not talking about chattel slavery. So I have to explain the 5 different types of slavery that's in the Old Testament and show how Paul is talking about indentured servitude and not chattel slavery. Then I show the history of slavery in the United States, which does not have a good history at all. And I show both the good and the bad, right? So people that were Catholics that were against slavery, but also Catholics that supported slavery, including bishop, priests, and religious orders. Then in the second part of the book, I look at 3 different ideologies that are being brought into the discussion about race that really don't belong there. So one of them is critical race theory, liberation theology, and the Black Lives Matter movement. And I argue that those 3 things actually make things worse, not better, because they're not designed to bridge the gap and close the gap to create racial harmony that actually creates greater division. And then finally, I lay out a step-by-step plan that we can do at the parish level to heal the wound of racism, because I believe that the Catholic Church is in a position to take the lead on this issue of race, because we're always coming from behind. We're always reacting to things, and we need to be a church that gets in front of issues, so people are following our lead instead of the church reacting to what the culture is doing.
That's absolutely amazing, and you provide some practical tools in the book on a parish level on how to tackle this, because I mean it's a pastoral responsibility of priests, and especially everybody who comes to a parish, to feel at home and not be segregated by race. I mean, we're here to become saints and to work for the salvation of souls. I mean, I think really the faith is what can unite people. I think our faith is an antidote to racism, being the universal church from everywhere. And I wish you the best of luck with that book, Deacon. We'll definitely be getting behind that. Let's continue in our topic and discuss 3 practical tools where we can take action to inform our consciences better, to make better decisions with the teaching of the church. How can people inform their consciences to have the best conscience possible to approach day-to-day life, Deacon?
Well, I think a good conscience is a fruit of prayer. So I think, number 1, we have to pray to help form our consciences to what is true, right? So, for example, a woman falls for the lies of Planned Parenthood that a child in the womb is a blob of tissue, is not really a person, that you made a mistake, you can get rid of the mistake and start your life over again. So let's say they fall for that lie. And but then they come to understand, well, wait a minute, they've been told this, so their conscience is being formed improperly. But then they come to see, for example, they walk by a pro-life rally, and they hear, as they're walking by, they hear the speaker pronouncing the truth and the beauty of the dignity of human life, and something stirs in their heart, right? So that natural law, that conscious, starts to work, and they start to feel something. And so, wait a minute, I've always been told that this is true, but this person's saying that this is true. Now I think we have an obligation to seek what is true. So the person does some research and they look at, the great work that Lila Rose is doing. They look at Father Frank Pavone, the work Priest for Life, and they come to realize, wait a minute, that actually was a child, that actually was a person, and so then so they're entering into a deeper understanding of what is true. And I think when they unite that with prayer, because then prayer, I think, helps you to see things very, very clearly when it comes to the conscious and moral life. Because, is what I just heard true? And here's the hard piece. Once I come to know that something is true, do I have an obligation and a responsibility to live my life according to what I know now to be true? That's hard.
Yep.
Right? So I think praying for the courage to follow truth wherever it leads, that's absolutely key. Right? So again, praying for God's will to understand, is this true, and to align my life with what I know to be true, even though it's going to be difficult, I think is one of the key things that we can do. The second thing I think that we can do here is to really, just like a violin player, right? A violin player, when they're playing, aligns themselves with the fundamental principles of violin playing. They have to learn how to read music. They have to learn how to hold the instrument correctly. So I think in getting deeper into our faith and understanding why the church teaches what it does, and not just throw it away and say, well, I don't like what the church teaches. That's no. Okay, you don't like it, right? That's fine, but try to discover why you don't like it. What is it about that teaching that is bothering me? Is there something in me? Is there something about the teaching? Is the teaching wrong? Am I wrong? Be honest enough with yourself to at least begin an honest investigation into the teachings of the church. And that's the key, why the church teaches what it does, right? And so I think, prayer is number one. I think honest inquiry, honestly asking questions about why the church teaches what it does and exploring that, I think is also very, very important. And then finally, I would say to practically to live what we believe. It's not good enough just to intellectualize and just to say, okay, I know this is good. I want to live a good life, and think about it in your head. We actually have to do it, right? Because think of Jesus's commandment: love God and love your neighbor as yourself, right? So that means that our faith takes on a very practical application.
Yeah.
Right. So for example, I remember once I was going to get lunch, and it was pouring rain outside. And so I got out of the car and I had my raincoat on. I was pulling it around myself to run as fast as I can into the pizza shop. And as I was getting ready to enter into the shop, I noticed there was a homeless person sitting outside getting drenched by the rain. And so just instinctively, I took off my raincoat and I gave it to this homeless person. Then I went and bought them lunch at the pizza place as well. So I didn't do that because there was no one else around. So I didn't do it to get attention. I didn't do it to see how good I am. I did it out of love, right? I mean, that's what the conscious, the forming a good conscience in accordance with the teachings of the church and a proper moral life and connecting with the natural moral law. I saw this person suffering and I was drawn to help them. And all of that comes out of that properly formed conscience. So we have to put the intellectual part of this formation of conscience into action. It just can't be words. It just can't be thoughts. We actually have to live that moral life out every day in the world.
So we have to live it when we're approached with certain situations every single day, and we have to practically apply it. But in the case where we did as much as possible in our conscience to inform ourselves, but let's say we had the wrong information, or let's say we made a wrong, okay, let's talk about the wrong judgment. So you've informed your conscience with the teaching of the church. Let's say on who to vote for. I mean, there's plenty of elections now. We have our elections here in Australia this coming Saturday. Let's talk a little bit about elections and the scenario of an election. You've informed your conscience about the teaching of the church, the moral issues, and you see which parties support which moral policies, and then let's say you inform yourself as much as possible about how government works and what's the likelihood of these bills getting through based on which party. What if not the knowledge aspect of the teaching of the church, but the application, you do your best, but let's say it's wrong or incorrect, or you could have made a better decision about it. And let's say ambiguity about decisions. There isn't 100% right or wrong when it comes to voting, because it depends on the member as well. There's other factors. How do we approach that situation? That's what really gets me with the conscious question. Is the practical application and really informing, applying the conscious with the teaching of the church.
Yeah. So here's the thing you often hear, George. You can't legislate morality, right? We hear that you can't legislate morality. Well, here's the thing. No matter what you vote for, you're violating someone's morality, right? Yeah. Whether that be a good or poor morality, you're violating someone's morality. So to say you can't legislate morality is ridiculous. And what we have to remember is that the issues that we're talking about, that you're talking about when it comes to voting, remember, for Catholics, there are 5 non-negotiable issues when it comes to voting: abortion, human cloning, euthanasia, and along with that, assisted suicide. Because remember, euthanasia is when the state or the hospital or the doctor kills you, and assisted suicide is when you take medication to kill yourself, right? Fetal stem cell research, not all stem cell research, right? Because right now there are 73 diseases being treated by fetal cord blood, skin cell grafts, and bone marrow, which are all legitimate. But when you experiment on embryos, that's a different thing. So abortion, human cloning, euthanasia, and assisted suicide, fetal stem cell research, and marriage, right? The so-called redefinition of marriage. So those things are non-negotiable. So when voting for a politician, you're going to look at, okay, what's their economic theory, or how they're going to do the economy. What do they think about the homeless problem? What do they think about taxes? And all those things are fine. But, so what some Catholics want to do is compartmentalize. They want to say, well, okay, I'm more focused on, the environment. What do they think about the environment? What do they think about immigration? What do they think about economics? What do they think about international relations and those kinds of things? And the moral stuff, well, so here's how we'll put it. Well, I'm personally against abortion or human cloning or euthanasia, but I can't tell anybody else what to do.
Yeah.
Here's a problem. Public officials are elected because they're supposed to support and uphold and build up the common good. What is best for everyone in culture and society? That's what they're elected to do, to help to strengthen the moral good of all of society. And so what has happened, because of the amount of money that's involved, the amount of prestige that's involved, they'll go against, these issues of life. It should say, it's just a continuum, right? So whether you're abortion or human cloning, that's the same continuum as the poor and the homeless and the migrants and the immigrants? No, because if you don't vote for, if you are for abortion, then homelessness doesn't matter because there's no people there. Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
You got to start with the very basis of human dignity. So abortion is a direct violation of human life. So you'll say, well, I can't tell a woman what to do with her body. Well, a child growing inside a woman's body is someone else's body. It's not her body. It's someone else's body. And let's just say rape or incest, right? Well, the woman should have to suffer. Well, they've already suffered through a rape. They've already suffered with incest. They're going to compound the problem by killing an innocent child who's also a victim of crime. That child that was conceived is also a victim of crime. We do not kill innocent crime victims.
Yeah.
See, these are the ways we need to think about these issues. And so we need to create a structure in politics and political life that helps to support women in those situations, not to make the problem worse by killing the child. But and if they don't want the child because of rape, it says fine, give the child up for adoption. There are plenty of people who can't have children, who would love and are to adopt, who are willing to adopt children and take them into their home and show them the love and the care that every human being deserves, and the respect that they deserve. So, or just human cloning or euthanasia or stem cell research or marriage. These are things that are fundamental to a society functioning well. Unless you respect the dignity and the life of every human person, you cannot have a just society. But they're not interested in the just society. They're interested in satisfying their political constituents.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a problem. And so we cannot vote for people that support those things. Yes, they may have a good policy on economics, but if they're wrong on these and these 5 issues, then we cannot, in good conscience, as Catholics, vote to support politicians in that way.
Let's talk about the question of, no politician's perfect. Do we have to pick the majority of the moral issues, or and also the likelihood of a candidate getting into office? Let's say we estimate roughly who's likely going to win, and whoever's likely going to win, who has the better moral policies.
Yeah, so think about it like this, George. Sometimes we have to think incrementally. What do I mean by that? Say you have a politician who is completely for abortion in every circumstance.
Yeah.
Then you have another politician who says, well, no, I do not support abortion past the first trimester or for the first 10 weeks. So they both support abortion, but you have one that supports abortion in all circumstances, no matter from conception until 9 months. But then you have another person who, well, no. I believe it's a person after 10 weeks. But before 10 weeks, it's not really a person. See, so both of them are wrong, right? But you have one person that at least there's a window there you can work with, right? At least you have a person there that is open to look at the science. So what if they think that a child begins at 10 weeks? What if we're able to show them that a child actually begins at conception?
Yeah.
You see? So see what I'm saying? So that's, in a sense, the lesser of two evils. Or
what if we have two candidates, one who is perfect with their moral policies, but they're a minor party, they're not going to win, and you have a major party candidate.
It doesn't matter about winning because God's in control.
Yeah.
So you vote for the one that that is voting for the common good, right, and not looking out for their political constituents. It's as simple as that. So there's no way there's gonna win. No, that doesn't matter. What matters is you have to vote according to your properly formed conscience, not about who wins or who loses. Because ultimately, it's not about winning or losing. It's about right and wrong. It's about justice, and injustice. That's what it's about, because that's how God is going to judge. So we need to be thinking about that as we're voting as well.
Yeah, exactly. So Deacon, what are your final words for people to discern their consciences and make better decisions in their day-to-day life?
Well, here's the thing. The things that we're talking about here, George, are difficult in the sense that we have a culture that's constantly pushing, that's constantly presenting, especially our young people, presenting with things that are so contradictory to church teaching. And because we have a lot of people who aren't rooted in church teaching, or it's just up here in their heads and it's not in their hearts, or not making the connection between the head and the heart, they're being sucked in by the vacuum and the lies of the culture. So I would say, again, to emphasize the three things: pray, right? We must pray that God will lead us to all truth, even though it may be a difficult journey. We have to do that. Second, we have to understand why the church teaches what it does. It's not good enough to say, I don't like the church teaching. Okay, why? What is it about the church teaching that you don't like? And is it something that's wrong with the teaching, or is it something that's wrong with me? You see, maybe I have an improperly formed conscience. And then finally, putting flesh on the bone, living that out in the world every day. Not just where the conscious formation is just an intellectual exercise, but it has to be part of the everyday lived experience, where we recognize opportunities to exercise that well-formed conscience in the world, and living that out faithfully according to the teachings of our church, and a properly formed conscience every day of our life.
Deacon, thank you for being with me. It's always a pleasure to have you here on the Catholic Toolbox, and hopefully we'll see you soon here in Australia next year.
I look forward to it very, very much, George. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Be sure to check out our website, thecatholictoolboxshow.com. That is thecatholictoolboxshow.com, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Especially follow us on YouTube and our social media at The Catholic Toolbox. So thank you for tuning in to the show. May God bless you. Until next week, God bless, take care, and take action.
In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox, as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity.